All right, welcome to the Work the System podcast, where we help entrepreneurs make more and work less using systems. And I'm your host, Josh Fonger. And today we're recording this Facebook Live, so make sure to give us a thumbs up, add comments. I'll try to answer those questions live with Matthew, and you can just do that by going to worksystem.com, liking or following the Facebook page. And then this podcast and future podcasts you can check out. All right, Matthew. So let me read your intro and give everyone kind of a taste of who you are. Matthew Kimberley helps small business owners enjoy more fun, freedom, and flow. He's the creator of Professional Persuasion, Delightful Emails, and the Single Malt Mastermind, and has spent half a decade as the head of the Book Yourself Solid School of Coach Training. He hosts the How to Get a Grip podcast and wrote a book on the same name. He lives in Malta with 2 sons, 1 wife, singular, and 1 dog. All right, Matthew, happy to have you on the show, and looking forward to learning. So, give us the history. So, how did you get into this line of work of sales training?
Right. So back in the day, before I even left high school, I was in sales. I was doing the only job that would have me, the legal working age in the UK is 16, and aged 15 and something months, I went knocking on the door of the local double glazing shop, the window seller. And I said, hey, I hear you pay on commission. I hear you turn a blind eye to dates of birth, and I'd be happy to make some money. So I started off cold calling old people in their home and dinner time. It's pretty much the lowest of the low when it comes to sales professions. And I still think to this day, if you're somebody who's cold calling people in their homes at dinner time, trying to sell them something they've never heard of, then there is a special place in hell for you. And that's how I started. Carried on through various junior sales job, door to door, bar work, which is very much a sales job. And then ended up, after a bit of international travel, I was working in Italy and Malaysia and Belgium. I ended up in Malta, which is where I live now, which is a small island in the Mediterranean. And I wasn't here illegally, but it would have been illegal for me to work for work permit, visa situation. So again, I needed somebody who turned a blind eye to my situation. And I found that in the timeshare industry. Now, you may or may not know much about the timeshare industry, but if you've ever sat through a presentation, then you probably know enough about it to realize that these guys are master manipulators. And what I learned during my year-long apprenticeship into the world of high-pressure psychological selling was that there's a system for selling. Was that there is a specific set of steps and processes that you can rely on mathematically in order to get a certain outcome. And I know this is true because the people I was working with were ugly, drunk, stupid, and yet by following the mandatory system, we continued across the board to close between 9 and 11% of every unqualified, sun-lotioned up, sunburned prospect that walked through the door. And I was just amazed by this. And I became fascinated by the psychology of selling, but knew that I couldn't stay in that industry if I wanted my liver and place in heaven to remain kind of healthy and guaranteed. So I left and I got into corporate sales. I was doing recruitment sales. So we went from B2C to B2B, which was again, telephone-based selling environment. Liked it so much, I started my own recruitment company and then realized that I hated being a company owner. So I had a staff, we had healthy turnover, we had real profits. And after about 3 or 4 years, I was way out of alignment. I was like, okay, I've learned everything I've learned over the last decade in selling, I'm applying. I can turn somebody into a salesperson. I can monitor them. I can give them routines. I can give them structure. They can make sales, even if they've got no. Yeah, they used to have to. You've heard this before, I'm sure. They had to pass the mirror test before I'd hired them. And the mirror is you hold the mirror up to their face, and if it steams up, if they're breathing, then they're probably good enough to have the job. And so there was, by relying on the structures, I was able to create a recruitment company, but I was way out of alignment. My son had just been born. I was working, Gordon Gekko style every hour that God sent. I had a slightly fractious relationship with my business partner. And I realized I didn't want to be talking C++ programming with procurement executives from large banks for the rest of my life, nor did I particularly want to be a manager. But there were a couple of things that I did enjoy. One of them was selling, and the other one was training people. So I thought if I could combine the two and become a sales trainer, then I'll be thrilled. Simultaneously, Josh, because I'm now a hotshot business owner in one of the hottest districts of Brussels, I'm going to all these breakfast networking events. And I'd watch these business coaches, executive coaches, life coaches, week after week, do terrible presentations. I mean, really boring and dry. And yet people were paying them. And I thought, wow, you can make a living doing this. You can make a living standing up in front of people, showing them how to do stuff. And if this guy can, then I definitely can. So that was that was what gave birth to version, I say 2.0, but really it's version 16.0 of my career, which is I'm going to move into teaching selling, and preferably from a stage somewhere, so I can not only have cash, but I can also have glory and adulation. And so I found out, I knew that I didn't want to go. I divested myself of my share of the recruitment company and jumped headfirst into learning how to become a coach. And I knew I could have winged it. Is that the past participle of wing? It's not wung it. I could have wung it. I could have taken it, could have wang it, could have taken it to market and just made it up as I went along. But that gave me anxiety. I was like, I'm probably not doing my clients a service. I'm probably not speeding up my learning curve if I make it up every time I go along. And so I was looking for, I'm going to use that word again appropriately, a system that I could buy, that I could use, that I could replicate, something that was proven with my clients in order to guarantee them a result. And so I got in touch with Michael Port, who'd written what was one of my favorite books at the time called Book Yourself Solid. Or rather, he got in touch with me because I was on his mailing list. And he was serendipitously running a coach training program. So he was licensing his intellectual property for the use of other professionals in return for study, mastery, and a fee. And I thought, well, I could do all of those things. I'm good at study. I'm brilliant at mastery. That was tongue in cheek. And I can afford the fee. So I went ahead and did that, realized, holy moly, this stuff is powerful, took it to market, got results for my clients, and became more and more involved in the organization at Book Yourself Solid until one day I was running it. I was Michael's business partner, head of Book Yourself Solid worldwide, training up the coaches who were coming through. And that was the beginning, really. Does that answer your question? I talk a lot, don't I? I've been going for like 20 minutes. Well, it was nice to see you, Josh. Thanks very much for having me on.
There we go. Time to conclude. No, great. I've got a ton of questions now. I wanted to ask you, well, let me go in order. Let me start from the very beginning because I had made a list here. So first, timeshares. What was the system? Because obviously they're persuasive and manipulators. What is the system to sell in that kind of situation? I'm curious.
Well, there was a framework. I'm not going to say there was a script. There wasn't a script, but there was a framework. And I certainly can't remember it in order, and I'll probably be missing a couple of pieces if I try to remember back that many years. But it began with somebody being bought in off the street under some kind of I've lost the word. Some kind of understanding about what they were there for, but we didn't know what it was because the guys outside in the street were given free rein. Tell them they're coming to see a dolphin show. Tell them they're coming for a back massage. Tell them there's a free gin and tonic. So we didn't know what they'd been told. They were naturally a bit, what kind of person gets in a car with a stranger when they're on vacation, right? You've won a scratch card. Congratulations. Anyways, they'd be bought in. We called them ups because they were unqualified prospects. The golden rule was the guys on the street only got paid if they stayed for a minimum of 1 hour. So if we let these ups go, before the hour was out, they'd be waiting for us round the back after, because it meant they didn't get paid. They got paid a flat fee. We got paid commission only. Golden rule number one, and first step of the entire presentation, was warm up. Warm up was also discovery. So we weren't allowed to mention the product. We weren't allowed to mention the opportunity. We weren't allowed to mention any of that until we'd spent 30 to 60 minutes chatting.
Wow.
Now, what we were actually doing during that chat was eliciting information. We wanted to know how many kids they had, how old their kids were, whether their kids were in college, how expensive the college was, what they did for a living, what kind of house they had they paid off their mortgage, where did they frequently go on vacation, what kind of hotels did they stay in. We were doing surreptitious qualification of their assets. See, is this person likely to buy? Now, it wasn't always as self-evident as you would think. It wasn't like this person always stays in 5-star hotels, therefore they're going to want to stay in our 5-star hotel. It was often this person always stays in 3-star hotels. That allowed us to adjust our pitch to say, this is where you are today. This is where you could be tomorrow for a very reasonable price. Whereas if they were accustomed to 5-star living, then we'd be selling perhaps an opportunity, an investment opportunity, a cost efficiency or something like that. So we'd spend that time getting to know them. I forget the various pieces, but it was always, we had to take them to do a site visit. The site was a building site. We had to paint the picture of what the hotel would look like when we got there. We had to sit them down and show them our testimonials videos, which could last 25 minutes. We had to show them the showroom, which was a show apartment. We had to do the logic, which was, this is how much you're spending today. This is how much you'll be spending if you do it this time. That was the mathematical applied to their logical brain procedure. And it was all listed out. There were 7 or 8 pieces. We had to do the financial close at the end, which was, put your credit card on the table. If the price is right, you'll do it, won't you? Yes, good. Let me go and get my manager. Then we do the bump and the load. And then the button up was very important. Button up was, after they'd been with us at this stage, not infrequently 6 hours, and agreed to say yes, then we would have to sit outside legal in order to make sure that it stayed in the bag. So then legal would do you're entering to a very serious agreement. Have you been told this? 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 Yes. Compliance all done. And then it would be done. So there was no room for maneuver. You couldn't improvise your way out of it. Every time you thought you had a lay down, every time somebody walked in and said, hi, I'm Barry, big wallet, what have you got for me? You couldn't skip it. You couldn't jump. You couldn't take any shortcuts. The shortcuts always over time came back to bite you in the butt. And we received training every single day that we were at work. First hour of every day was training.
Wow, that's interesting. So I mean, going from there, which was, I don't know, something like 10 years ago or more, to where you are now, do you carry some of those same techniques around, or has the game changed? Have people changed? Has selling changed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm selling a different thing. I don't think selling has changed. I'm selling different things. Here's the interesting thing. There were 2 teams. Well, many interesting stories, but there were 2 teams in this timeshare organization, which is still running today. There was the in-house, and there was the cold line. Cold line were unproven prospects, uncertain. The in-house were existing customers, people who had already bought something, either from us or from somebody in the network or from one of the competitors. That was where you wanted to work. You wanted to work on in-house because you didn't have to convincing people of anything is difficult, but you didn't want to convince them of the merits of investing or buying timeshare. These were proven buyers. You basically had the option to fish in the buyer list or fish in the cold prospect list, right? So it's the obvious one, which one you go to. If you want to extract the cash from the asset which has proven buyers in is the one where you want to go. And if they bought from us, they certainly had problems that we could fix with the part exchange. So there was always an upsell or a cross-sell opportunity. Now, what I'm selling today is I've kind of gone in the complete reverse. I read a book after I finished my timeshare training, which books were written like Bengay III and Zig Ziglar. That was our training back then. And then I moved into corporate, and I discovered a guy called David Sandler, who is not around anymore, but his organization is, and it's called the Sandler Training System, I think, something like that. And I bumped it. I met a franchised Sandler coach in London over a beer, had a couple of chats with him, and was completely sold on the system. Now, I ended up not working with Sandler for various reasons, but he uses a completely different approach. He says, you've got to exercise complete control over the situation. And you, rather than running towards the prospect, you want to be finding the prospects who'll be chasing you. And that's or making them chase you. He talks about a pendulum. He says, if a prospect is leaning towards warm, if you're talking to them and they're on a scale of 10, they're like at 8, 7 or 8. What an inexperienced amateur or badly trained salesperson will do is say, right, it's almost in the bag. Let's see if I can just nudge them up a little bit. But you're never going to, Sanders' argument is, and I'm really dumbing this down but through not for your audience, of course, but just because my memory and ability to explain concepts that I didn't write are not great. He says what you really need to do is actually push them in completely the other direction, because it's only through momentum are you going to get them up. It's like your kid is on a swing set, right? And they're in the 8 or 9 o'clock position. It's super difficult. You don't chase them when they're at the peak of their arc and try and push them over the line. You wait for them to come back again, and then you give them a nudge. So Sandler talks about, for example, the takeaway, or the double negative close or something. So someone's going, okay, I think we're ready to do this. Rather than say, great, let's get the paperwork, the salesperson says, I'm glad you are, because I've got some concerns. And then you get the prospect fighting you to actually sign the contract, you see. So this is a super simplified version of it. But I loved that. When I discovered that, I was like, hang on, for my entire professional career, recruitment as well, I put the prospect on a pedestal. I was slightly scared of them. In the pecking order, I was the junior and they were the senior. Like in corporate, it was a bit, in timeshare, we had an unhealthy dependence or need for the prospect to say yes. And in recruitment, we were just kind of grateful to have been granted an audience with His Holiness, the head of information technology at big bank PLC. So we'd walk in there and he'd have a big desk and he'd sit down and say, right, so tell us why we should work with you. And you go, oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and see you. I know you're a very busy man. And then you get open your PowerPoint presentation, which we used to print off back in those days. And we say, I've got a 45-page presentation. And he's like, well, I haven't got much time. And you go through every page really, 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 really quickly because you want to do everything as much as possible. And he'd be looking at you going, he'd be going, I am so in control here. I'm going to click my fingers. Security are going to come. They're going to take you away. What I would say now, and what I would train my clients to say through a combination of experience, what we're selling, the big impact that Sandler and Book Yourself Solid and all of these things had on my life, is if someone looks you in the eye and says, so tell us why we should work with your firm. Really, the only response is, well, I don't know if you should. We're here to find out. So let me ask you some questions. It's like you go to see the bank, right? The bank doesn't, as a retail customer, the bank doesn't need your business, right? Which is why they make you fill in, which is why they make you wait in line, which is why you have to take a ticket, which is why you have to fill in 80 pages, which is why they don't come to your office. The minute they need you, and they say, this is the way we do things around here. You don't get to dictate the terms of your mortgage unless you're the big fat cat. And then the bank travels to see you and they say, don't worry about the signature, we'll scan something through, and they bring you a bottle of whiskey. So I think you can be the bank. I think you can, anybody, no matter what size their business, has an obligation to their mental health to sell prospects something that they want to buy. You can either go and say, hey, I've got a brand new way of doing things. I'm going to show you and convince you of doing that. Or you can say, hey, look, you know what I'm good at. You know my expertise. You appear to be a hungry crowd. So if you want to eat and you want me to be the person to feed you, let's chat. All right. So you eliminate the desperation at the front end. And then when it comes to the sale, you get to choose your customers, which is 100% Book Yourself Solid. You get to dictate the terms of business. You can't have a rewarding, fulfilling, romantic or business relationship unless both parties really want to be there. And so much of the old timeshare sales, and frankly, it still exists today, online and offline, in every industry, works on the assumption that they can trick a prospect into becoming a customer. And you can, for sure, but you've got to sleep with yourself at night. Off from behind the lectern now. Sermon over.
No, but I think this is great. So with entrepreneurs, because you mentioned that you could train anybody to sell, and sometimes people think you have to be born naturally a salesperson, or you got to hire a salesperson. And I work with entrepreneurs, and so do you do. A lot of times they want to push the selling off to a new employee because they are afraid of selling or they're not trained in selling. So what do you take entrepreneurs through? Because one of the best salesperson people for a company is the owner. So is there a process you take them through? I mean, I'm looking at this sheet where it says like procrastinators all the way to masters. Like, is there a flow that you have to work with them through?
Oh, you saw that, did you? You checked out what it was like, did you, to work with me? Yeah. So the first, you said something very interesting, that the owner is always the best salesperson. That's categorically true. Mm-hmm. I remember when I started in recruitment, I was taken to a meeting where we took a 48-page printed out PowerPoint presentation. The first page of the presentation said, Vanessa, who was my senior colleague, senior recruiter, Matthew, junior recruiter. Nobody addressed a word to me, nothing. Nobody said a word to me throughout the whole meeting because I was the junior. The most effective salesperson in any organization is the most senior person in the organization, full stop. I want to speak to your manager because your manager is somebody that I'm prepared to deal with. So it's not, that said, if you hate selling and you have other resources available to you, for example, staff, access to a great sales trainer who can train your staff, and the resources financially to cover all of that, do it. No one's forcing you to sell. I think it's a good idea, depending on the size of your business. I think it's if you're a really scrappy bootstrap. Thank you. We don't use that expression in Europe. It's late in the day for me now, 7:30, well past cocktail hour. If you're a bootstrapped organization and you've got no money, then yeah, you're going to wear every single hat, understood. And I think if you're a small organization of, say, a dozen people or less, you should expect to get your hands dirty with sales, especially closing the sales, for most industries. And it doesn't hurt if the owner is also the person who's setting strategy, really understands the marketplace. Right? Doesn't that solve 50% of our woes? People won't buy from us because you haven't got a clue who they are or what questions they're asking. That said, yes, I can take somebody from being hopeless to being hopeful. I can take somebody from being scared to being confident. And there's a big difference between confidence and enthusiasm. I've got plenty of clients who hate selling, but are still confident that they'll get the results, right? That's the difference. So the difference between confident and enthusiastic, right? I am confident that somewhere in the world today, somebody in the next hour, of all the 6 billion people on the planet, somebody has tripped over and broken their ankle. I'm confident. I could say with almost statistical certainty that there's been one instance of a broken ankle, probably since we've been talking. But I'm not enthusiastic about that. That's bad news for everybody involved. But I can rely upon the data to give me confidence about that certainty. So you probably will have heard of lead measures and lag measures. I can't remember who coined it. I'm sorry if it was you. I should give you credit. Not you, Josh, the creator of the lead measure and lag measure ideas. Listen to this. I should give you credit. People say I'm going to do 100K in sales this month, and they get disappointed when they don't. And often what they haven't done, sometimes they have, but I'm amazed, even at the size of large, successful organizations that don't know their numbers, is worked out what needs to be, what fuel are you using in order to generate that amount of money? How many offers does that need to be? Let's say you're selling a program, a course, a product, a book for $1,000. You know that you need to shift 100 units of inventory, or inventory as you guys say, right? So in order to shift 100 units of inventory on the understanding that everybody's only going to buy one, we're going to have to see 100 buyers. 100 people are going to have to successfully buy. That means we might have to make the offer, and we don't know at this point. We're making a hypothesis. We're going to hypothesize that we can see 300 people this month who are sufficiently qualified, and we're going to make 300 offers. And if we have a 33% closing rate on our 300 offers, then we stand some chance of making the money, right? But in order to have that, we need to make the appointments. So how many people are we going to have to call to make 300 appointments? Probably 1,500 people. We're going to have to call 1,500 people to get a 20% closing rate on appointments. And yet it gets to the third week of the month and people say, oh, I haven't made many sales this month. I say, well, how many sales offers have you made? And I go, not many. I say, well, I think I see a correlation there. So it's not, sales isn't entirely a numbers game, but numbers is a huge part of it. Yes, we can be smart about it. Yes, we can maximize the value of every single opportunity. Yes, we can cross-sell. We can upsell. We can tweak our pricing. We can do all of these things. But if we're not doing the calls, if we're not generating the leads, if we're not making the presentations, if we're not at the end of our presentation saying, hey, are you going to buy something? Then we're not going to make bank. We're not going to hit our numbers. So what I do with my clients who come to me, and they're typically not salespeople. I prefer to work with business owners now. I used to work a lot with corporates, but I find I'm doing my best work now with people who own businesses. Mm-hmm. I can instill in them the discipline and the importance of focusing on the numbers and not deviating from the route to the numbers. Deviating from the numbers for most of my clients is typically found in things like exploring new marketing opportunities, getting obsessed with Instagram taps, trying to solve problems that they're not qualified to solve. Like I'm trying to move my header, the header on my website 3 pixels to the left, or identifying opportunities for prestige rather than for results. For approval, I'm trying to get this, I'm trying to get that. They get easily distracted because they're naturally curious business owners. So I try to keep them on the straight and narrow. I really stand over them virtually and say, look, here's your direction, stick to it. The other thing I then do is, I do lots, it's kind of what I do for a living, but one of the critical things is people hate changing the nature. Right. So people say, the reason I'm not making sales is because I'm afraid of failure. And I totally get that. Like it sucks. You make 20 offers, 30 offers, 40 offers, a whole 2 months of offers. I did this in my timeshare days, 2 months of offers daily, twice a day. Nobody bought anything. Man, I just want to give it all up. And you have to be able to deal a little bit with that, but that's not the real reason people don't like it. So people say they're afraid of failure. I get it, but it's not right. People then say, I'm afraid of success. I don't feel that I'm worthy of it. I don't get that either. I think that's laziness, right? If I handed you, Josh, a big plate of success, you say, thanks very much. But you typically don't want to work for it. They want the 6-pack, but they don't want to do the crunches, right? And I think the real reason there's so much sales reluctance in the world is because most people who aren't psychopaths hate changing the nature of the relationship with the person who they're friendly with. So we're getting along fine, we're getting along great, and then I ruin it all by saying, hey, give me your money. Like, I don't know, we're getting on so well. Is it appropriate to ask them to become a prospect? Or it's not really the time, we're having a cocktail, and it's really simple. Right? I can train them out of that, but it has to come with exposure. So it's simple. You say, look, you look the person in the eye, you go, you know what? I would love to explore doing business with you. Do you think we could schedule a chat about that? Boom. Yeah, great. Boom. Okay, done. Fantastic. Let's get it on the calendar. Stuffing the pipeline. Beautiful. Then when you sit down to have that chat, respect the intelligence of your prospect. Cut straight to the chase. You look them in the eye. The first question after you exchange niceties is, so just so we're on the same page, the purpose of our chat today is to work out whether or not we're going to be working together. Is that right? And they say yes. Then all of a sudden we're on the same page. And that is the polar opposite of my timeshare days, when they didn't even know there was a sales offer coming until it was too late, until they were already bought in. And that was not respecting the intelligence of your prospects. You want someone in there who is on the same page as you. And you say, hey, we're going to talk about a commercial opportunity. What do you say? And sometimes that reframe is all my clients need to hear in order to have the confidence to say it.
That's good. Well, because of time, I didn't want to skip, but you wrote a book on how to get a grip. Wanted to bring.
I've answered 3 questions in half an hour, Josh.
Yeah, there's only 20 more left. We'll do a extended version. I have not read the book. But what is the big takeaway from the book? How to get a grip? What can entrepreneurs learn from that particular book?
So hold off on buying the book, because I got a note from my publisher after 6 years that it is being republished in a 2nd edition at the end of this year.
Okay.
Which is excellent news. It's also changing title. What am I allowed to swear?
If you want to.
I'm not going to. I'm going to use the asterisk. But there's a glut of books at the moment that are doing very well in the personal development world. Mark Manson, I think, wrote a book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F.
Yes.
It's another one, the life-changing magic of something F. And there's, I am, or I used to be, a miserable F. And so these are selling really, really well. My publisher, completely of their own accord, said, this book that you wrote 6 years ago, we think we're going to rename it and we're going to reissue it. And it's going to be called Get an Effing Grip. So my book is currently called How to Get a Grip. It's full of profanity on the inside, but if you don't want it on the outside, grab a copy now. If you want the new and improved version, wait a while. It's a self-help book. So when I was in my miserable years, final years of recruitment, not seeing my newborn kid and fighting with my business partner and feeling everything I did was not good enough, I slapped myself. I said, somebody needs to give me a slap. I need to go to therapy. I need to sort something out. And I used a creative outlet of writing. And I wrote myself a letter, really. It said, Kimberly, get a grip. And I wrote it publicly and anonymously on a website, a blog. I think it was called a weblog back in the day. And it got some interest. People liked it. People liked the writing. And a couple of people contacted me, including a publisher, and it got turned into a book. And that was 2011. So it's really a no-nonsense, very profane guide to taking yourself less seriously, getting more hours in the day, and getting better at getting stuff done. It's a great book for reading on the John. It's episodic, short chapters, and probably too much to read in one sitting.
Mm-hmm. But it sounds like it helped you and helped a lot of entrepreneurs kind of get a grip and actually understand how to have a better life, right?
To this day, it sold really well in the UK and continues to do so. And it never quite translated transatlantically because it's a very British book. It was before, I've only really discovered, I've started doing a lot of work in the US, but it's really only been since 2012, 2013. And the book was written before then. So it doesn't translate very well. I'm pushing for a US version with the second edition. But every week or at least every month, certainly every month now, every week in the beginning, every month now, I get someone write to me and say, hey, that was great. Because I look back on it and say, it was a stupid book. It's got lots of swear words in it. It's a bit flippant. But it's sold tens of thousands of copies, and people continue to write to me and say, thank you so much for writing that book. I did some of the exercises. I feel better about myself. You helped me. It got translated into German. I started getting emails in German. I can't read German, but I assume they said the same thing. I'll probably find they're like, this is the worst book I've ever read. But I don't speak German, so I'll never know.
Well, because of time, Matthew, I want to give you a chance and give you the floor for a final thing. So what's one question I didn't ask you? I should have asked you, something you want to leave the audience with that you think would be important.
We used to spend an hour, sometimes more, warming up our prospects in the timeshare industry. And we generally don't get that luxury. And it's not really practical for anyone who's running a business that's systematized and has some sense of scale. There is no better way of turning a cold lead into, and really cold, like someone who hasn't walked into your showroom or attended your event, someone who's maybe curious about the thing that you're offering on your website. There's no better way to turn them into someone who's piping hot than to build an ongoing relationship through email marketing. Everyone's got a mailing list. Most people are doing terrible things with it, if anything at all. I'm on a mission to change that. And if you go to delightfulemails.com and have a look at the work I'm doing there, it's about making emails more fun, more welcome, more effective. I want everyone in my sphere of influence, the little influence I have, I want to show them that writing marketing emails can be easy, can be fun for you and for your correspondent, and can lead to long-term financial results for your organization. So delightfulemails.com.
Okay, so that's for, I'll probably check that out for myself. That's definitely a pain point in our organization. And then anywhere else I can find you for maybe, I know you do speaking engagements and consulting. Yeah. Anywhere else to go?
Yeah, if you go to Matthewkimberley.com, or probably easier to remember, howtogetagrip.com. They both point in the same direction. Howtogetagrip.com will take you to my podcast landing page. Subscribe to that, have a listen. That would be great. And if you click the homepage there, you'll see my face, probably some faces some of the clients who've worked with me in the past. Blog doesn't get updated anymore, but make sure you give me your email address so that I can send you delightful missives between now and perhaps one day in the future when it makes sense for us to talk about working together.
Okay, very good. Well, Matthew, appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us, and everyone for tuning in today to today's podcast. Tune in next week. We're going to be sharing another expert with you, teaching you a tool, technique, or some way to grow your business so you can make more and work less. And before signing off today, I wanted to make sure that I let you know that we are giving away a copy of Sam's book. It's right behind me right here. Hopefully going to twist his arm and get some of those things signed. And if you leave a comment on one of the platforms, wherever you're watching this podcast or listening to it, leave a review, send us an email to info@workthesystem.com. Let us know that you reviewed it, and we will be sending one book out every week. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next week on the podcast.